Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining this live event. We're on LinkedIn, we're on YouTube, we're on Twitter, and I'm here to talk today about the topic of the overall revenue effectiveness framework. The point of this framework is really to help companies understand how to bring the mindset that makes them so successful in manufacturing operations and apply it to sales. So let's jump in and start. Just quick introduction myself. I'm Ed Marsh. I've run businesses. I now consult with B2B companies on revenue growth. I really work in two primary areas. One is improvement of sales teams with a broad range of industries, middle market B2B companies. And then the other is the entire revenue growth process with industrial manufacturers. I hold Private Directors Association certificates, and I'm directorship certified by the National Association of Corporate Directors. I've got experience across a variety of industrial and tech businesses, lots of global experience. I graduated Johns Hopkins University, former Ranger Qualified Airborne Infantry Officer, located in the Boston area. That's a quick thumbnail sketch of me. Big point. Stick around to the end of this for a free diagnostic that will dig into the overall revenue effectiveness framework and give you a way of kind of answering some questions and getting a sense of where your company might be in the process. Let's start kind of level setting a bit about American manufacturing. Manufacturing had stagnated, and then it blossomed into an amazing production machine during World War II. And then it continued to grow, but there were certainly some structural problems. Quality was poor. Companies put a quality inspection station at the end of the line. That didn't really change the quality issues. I wish I could play this video for you. Go and find it on YouTube. It's Lucy and the Chocolate Factory. It's funny. I mean, the stuff starts coming down the line and they can't keep up. In this case, packing it off, but really the same applies in terms of quality. In many cases, the solution was just to push harder on the system, which really just exacerbated the problems. And it's much like what companies are doing now in marketing and sales. You know that from a full inbox and voicemails and LinkedIn messages. You're getting deluged with stuff as companies just try to push harder in order to make sales happen. But they're not addressing the fundamental quality issues. So let's think about how we got manufacturing on track. I mean, Deming said, if Japan can, why can't we? And so beginning in about 1950, he spent years in Japan helping Japanese manufacturers develop and implement statistical management systems to improve production and quality. Of course, that was incredibly successful. And around 1980, as American manufacturers realized that the Japanese were onto something, he became recognized in the US as some manufacturers began to adopt his best practices here. Now, let me just say, I'm not a lean expert. I'm not a consultant on how to use Deming's techniques to improve manufacturing. I'm not a black belt. I'm nothing like that. My point here is that there's an opportunity for us to use a process engineering mindset for top line growth. And so we need to kind of back up and understand the analogy that we're using. And among those is this PDCA cycle, the plan, do, check, and act. Also, there's a lot about measurement. I mean, you'll recognize some of these terms here, the total quality management, Kaizen, A3s, OEE, overall equipment effectiveness, things like that. Let's talk about OEE in a little bit more detail. The premise of OEE is that the net quality output of a production line or a system is the product of the efficiency of each of the steps along the way. In this example, there's 4 steps. Each one is pretty good. The first one is, mediocre. Then you've got a couple that are 98% efficient, one 92% efficient. But the point is, even though the lowest efficiency of any step is 81.5%, the line efficiency is only 72%, and that's not great. That's a C minus. So if you can identify the efficiency of each step, then it's possible to select the steps where you can have the biggest impact, figure out the root causes, and fix it. And so now imagine your revenue growth process. There's hundreds, thousands of steps from customer research and SEO through close rate to reorder rate and everything in between and a few beyond that. Where are the gaps? What are the low efficiency steps? Companies have figured this out. I mean, they engineer their process, they measure, and they continuously improve across a number of functions. Operations, procurement, finance, engineering, manufacturing, those are pretty well figured out. And when something develops, a problem arises, they become aware of something, the next biggest problem floats to the top, they've got a process for following it. Unfortunately, for some reason, companies don't typically do that on the front end of the business, the manufacturing, the sales, and success function. And that's exactly where ORE comes in. The concept of ORE is that you've got a system. So you've got an efficiency in strategy times the efficiency in marketing times the efficiency in sales times the efficiency in success. So your net quality output of your revenue growth system is reflected as the profitable, predictable revenue growth that you generate. Let's dive into a little bit more detail and look at a couple examples, and we're going to talk more conceptually. Let's take the marketing example. This is obviously really simplified. We could look at a lot of marketing activities the old way. We could say, okay, we generated this many trade show leads and had this much traffic on the website. Or we can take a more rigorous approach and we can measure, for instance, and these are just random examples and they may not apply the same to every business. They may not be the right ones for your business, but to illustrate the concept, we could measure the number of key terms for which we rank and where we rank for them. And then the click-through rate. In other words, where we appear in a search, do people actually click on the result? And then the website visitor to lead conversion rate. And then the sales lead connection rate. How many leads actually end up eventually talking to sales? And then the product of those would be our effectiveness at driving sales meetings as a marketing function. I'm going to change the layout here so this is a little bit easier to read. That way you'll be able to see what's going on the screen. But here's where we deviate from the linear manufacturing example. Ranking for key terms isn't something that marketing can do completely on their own. They need strategy input from management on the company's targets and goals and details on the ideal buyers, not only those today, but those that the company believes will be their growth opportunity in the future. Converting visitors to leads involves technology. It means good experience design, and often it means sales engagement via chat. And of course, the sales lead connection rate requires top level sales performance, well coached, accountable, and good salespeople with good sales enablement, including effective email templates and content. In other words, we're talking about an integrated, engineered system. It's not something that we can just say, it's up to marketing. Let's take it a step further. Let's think about sales. Now, we could run an ORE analysis, overall revenue effectiveness analysis of a sales process, starting with outbound prospecting and then the connect rate, then the connects to meetings, then the meetings to projects, projects to sales. And with that, we could establish the product just as with a machine process or a production line. But the connect rate will depend on various factors beyond sales skills and talent. For instance, the quality of the data that marketing provides to select the companies, how well defined the ICP is, the ideal customer profile, the technology that supports the outbound prospecting efficiency and email templates, even email deliverability, the tools for sales video that can enhance it, dialing systems, access to good mobile numbers. So sales has to have the technique and the skill, but they're relying on marketing. The rate at which connects turn into meetings depends not just on sales goal, but also on the enablement content that marketing provides in addition to the technology. For instance, if a sales outreach is effective at getting somebody to visit the website, does a chatbot automatically connect them via live chat to the salesperson who had been reaching out? And the project creation rate or the effectiveness at converting from meetings to qualified opportunities is similar. I mean, in all of these cases, we can identify all of the contributing steps, we can put metrics to them, and then we can also view them in the context of the entire top line revenue growth context. So we can think of the sales process as generally linear with some involvement between departments on certain steps, or we can get more sensible and we can really understand it from the buyer context. Let's look at what that looks like. And it's startling and it's intimidating. Buyers determine the process. And as you can see, it's a very complex process, one with many retracements and engagements in ways where activities that would traditionally be marketing or sales at any point in the journey The the buyers don't care where they are. They may do something that we think is marketing, and then they may engage in a way that we think is with sales, and they may back to marketing and back and forth. All they care about is getting the answers they want at the right time. So in our company owns that relationship? And the answer is it's not marketing or sales, it's the revenue growth team. So we've got steps that we have to optimize. We've got a process that we have to optimize, and we have to figure out how we can convert the spaghetti, chaotic buying journey into something that we can address with a completely interwoven, properly engineered revenue growth process comprised of marketing and sales functions. So things have to be integrated. We're going to kind of dive into some details here. Um, we can look at the types of functions and disciplines that have to be designed in the system. We can dig into them several layers deep. There's a lot of granularity, kind of the atomic level working on up. I mean, as an example, let's talk about sales, recruiting, and hiring. Not only does it tie into strategy, because we have to hire reps who can sell the kinds of products to the kinds of buyers to help maintain the margin based on the future roadmap. For instance, maybe you're going to move from the current model to a subscription model or completely new technology, not just what you've traditionally done. So when we hire sales reps, we have to understand the strategy and where we're going. But it also means that we have to hire people going forward who are very facile with technology and accountable, because sales is getting harder. We need more accountability. So that means that we might need a process for consistent recruiting and hiring that includes accurately understanding and defining the job, writing an accurate and effective job posting, not just a description, but a posting that's designed to attract the right candidates rather than just more applicants. Experience with different online platforms to attract candidates. Efficiently screening applicants with a brief phone interview, then a longer in-person interview, and then a final meeting. We have to have clear steps to eliminate any bias. We need a formal, structured set of interview questions and process for each of the participating interviewers. We need scorecards to capture objective impressions. We need adequate reference checks, a rigorous onboarding process to ramp people up quickly. And we need coaching based on the results of the sales assessment to proactively build on strengths and help people contribute to the bottom line quickly. So we can tie metrics to each step of this process. And we could know, for instance, that only 12% of salespeople think they're onboarded well. Each of these steps has numerous measurable factors behind it, and the effectiveness of each impacts the overall revenue effectiveness. And that's only one tiny piece. That's just recruiting new salespeople. So zooming back up, we come to this question of integration, this high-level view to make sure that all these pieces fit together. So it's not just a linear progression like in many manufacturing OEE examples, but it's deeply interrelated. So let's look at this example on the slide here. This is an example of content creation. So content's what we use, for marketing. It's kind of this catch-all term that means we're creating articles or white papers or videos or presentations. I mean, this that we're doing right now, this LinkedIn Live, is an example of content. In a traditional industrial marketing approach, the marketing department starts a blog and publishes a newsletter every once in a while. There's no way to tell really whether it impacts revenue. There's no context for it as part of a system that's engineered to drive results in conjunction with sales tied to strategy, et cetera. So how should content creation work? Well, I mean, this is one example. Marketing needs to create content that actually ties to these other functions, not just, something that they conjure up on their own, spit out, and hope that it works. So the strategy needs to be clear. What prospects are we targeting with a metrics-driven ICP, ideal customer profile, based on the corporate strategic objectives, which competitor we're targeting, what margins we have to maintain, the volume we're looking for, geographic markets, industry markets, et cetera. And then deep, nuanced, qualitative buyer research based on that strategy. So then with that research, then that gives us a rich understanding of the persona, the compelling business issues, the buying team, the buying journey, the questions that buyers are asking at each stage in the buying journey. And then marketing can take that and conduct key term research to understand what content topics will not only resonate with the buyers, but also help generate traffic and leads and more engagement. The buying journey and the buying team are going to inform how content is planned into an editorial calendar in order to speak to each member of the buying team at each stage in the buying journey. And this, of course, raises an interesting point. The content isn't only for lead generation and SEO. In other words, the content is not only to help new prospects find the company, it's also to support sales. Content should help to qualify, filter out prospects who would take sales resources but aren't a fit for our ICP. It should help a deal champion sell internally. In other words, content that they can present to their colleagues that are on the buying team but may not be in the meetings with our rep to help them understand where they are. It should be a set of tools to help sales. We call that sales enablement content. It's material that sales uses to address issues that aren't covered in meetings or to help guide buyers through analysis considerations. But it's not just enough to create sales content. You have to have the right technology. For instance, a website that makes it easy for prospects to find the right material for them, and a designed experience flow to guide them to buy something that they don't normally buy. Sales has to be trained and coached on how to use enablement content as a proxy assistant in their sales process. You need metrics to track how it's used by each rep, the frequency, the stage in the buying journey, how their prospects engage with it. Of course, that means you need sales training for certain sales skills and coaching and role playing. You have to establish KPIs and measure them and track what content helps to actually drive leads and bring opportunities to a close. So this simple example of content, we see how you can't just spit out blog posts. It's tying together strategy, it's tying together marketing, it's tying together sales. It's complex, and I understand it sounds intimidating. The reality is that just simply creating content without considering those factors means that you add a very low effectiveness number to that step in your process. And we've seen what happens when you have a low effectiveness number. The net quality output at the end is severely hampered as a result. All right, let's kind of talk about some common barriers to getting this done. And let's be realistic. There are barriers that we need to acknowledge, and these often relate to expectations and norms and traditions. So remember that we're talking about companies that typically have a very small marketing team that, arranges trade shows, orders some print brochures, does some journal advertising, and a large field sales team. Traditionally, marketing may generate a couple leads and then kind of heave them over the wall to sales, and then they're done. The silos aren't integrated. They're simply, as you see here, silos. Think about the example we just looked at with content. Successful content means several things. We need a clearly defined strategy. We need to invest more in marketing. We need to talk about new things. Creating content is, it doesn't help if it's just a mediocre blog article that talks about, vomits up stuff about your company. It's got to talk about topics of substance to buyers. And there's change and accountability that's involved. That's perhaps the most important. And it's important to think about as we consider the angst of that change. Many companies went through wrenching changes when they implemented statistical manufacturing and operational processes as well. I mean, people, longtime loyal employees in companies simply couldn't adapt when they implemented lean. And the same may be true here. That's the reality. I mean, management will have to refuse to work with prospects that aren't a good fit. Marketing will have to focus efforts on activities and topics and technology that tie to the top line in a clear and measurable way. And sales will have to be accountable for a number of KPIs along the way before the revenue number. Sales management may not be up to the new requirements. And the reality is some longstanding members of the sales team may not be either. So I get it. This is a lot. And you're already busy. You're already overwhelmed. So how do you implement this? And the typical answer is incrementally. A typical conversation, something along the lines of, we need more sales leads. When we're at the table, we win more than our fair share. We just need to get to the table because buyers are harder to reach. So the company thinks they need more leads. Or maybe we're getting lots of qualified opportunities, but we're discounting too much. We need some negotiation training. But here's what I know from experience. I can help your marketing team create more leads with a modest investment in content, technology, and consulting. I can help your sales team perform better. But it's not going to work if we treat it as silos. I mean, you generate more leads and a mediocre sales team won't sell them. And that's not a critique of your team. I mean, many of you watching today are folks that I haven't met, haven't studied your sales team. I've just watched this video many times before. The leads are different. The sales conversations are different. The rigor required for successful follow-up is higher today. The sales skills are different. And in many cases, the guidance that comes from management creates contradictory signals, like spend your time only working on qualified opportunities versus cultivate relationships and target companies and create opportunities. So my point is that just jumping in one spot doesn't work because it isn't all tied together. Now, you can't do everything at once. And I understand this is complicated by the fact that your departments aren't tightly integrated yet. There may be tension between them. There may be resentment. There's people that have organizational chart responsibility and budgets that are kind of tied up in a certain way, and they're going to be hesitant to see those adjusted. But we have to figure out how to do it. When you approach the point, let's say you were trying to move from 93 to 97% efficiency in a step. I mean, it's possible to take one sort of approach, but in most cases, companies, typical middle market industrial manufacturers, haven't even codified the system. I mean, it's running at, you need scientific notation, 0.000001% efficient. Again, the product of all the steps along the way. So we need to take a different approach. So shameless plug, that's what I help companies do. And the barcode I'll pop up at the end gives you access to a download that will introduce you to that. But I want to talk about another way, this visual from David Perel. The idea of fixing one piece at a time is kind of like the printer method. And I know from experience, it's going to take a long time till everybody sees the full picture, understands what's going on. It's hard to maintain management focus and resource allocation and enthusiasm and accountability, not to mention departmental collaboration and other priorities long enough to let that picture emerge. The alternative is the pixel method. So in other words, we're going to display the whole thing originally, and then gradually it's going to become higher resolution. You can think of this kind of as a maturity model where using this process engineering mindset, we're going to continuously identify the areas of maximum impact, figure out the root causes, and improve them in a prioritized and manageable way. So it can be a scary and overwhelming prospect, but honestly, so was the change when companies adopted lean manufacturing 20 years ago. It also means a leap of faith because the nature of many industrial companies is to kind of hold on to tradition very tightly, study it, redesign it. It's uncomfortable to just kind of let go and try something completely new. When you're willing, when you're either frustrated enough or intrigued enough, I can certainly help you launch. Just recognize that it's going to feel uncomfortable. It's kind of like building the plane while we're flying it and then trying to land it. Part of the approach, though, is to learn from successful models. And there's a number that we can learn from in the technology space that can give you a running start in the industrial space. Let's talk about a common problem, though, a risk that we need to talk about. Having built on the analogy of Deming, now I need to caution you because what we're talking about will involve changing sacred cows. That's not how our industry works. We're not going to change what got us here. The kind of stuff you'll wonder if it's the right move. You'll face a lot of skepticism, often passive aggressive resistance. And at the same time, you'll see the problems. You might even feel the churning in your gut. Buyers are changing. Your company buys differently. It's harder to get into new logos. It's harder to create projects. Your salespeople have a harder time reaching prospects. Forecasts are unreliable. Remote sales makes it harder. The bottom line is that revenue is substantially more unpredictable, so something has to give. So it's logical that you might want to run some tests to see if this works or that works or a different technique. And I understand that makes sense, except there's two problems with it. First, when you declare that it's a test, that gives everyone room to treat it like a test. When you say, let's try this and see how it works, first of all, the resources applied are fractional and you haven't refined the process. You'll say, yeah, I understand, how it all needs to work together, but we have to prove the concept first. So we'll do it as a standalone. And then if you take the lead generation example, for instance, that I used earlier, sales will understand that what they're, really measured on is not necessarily the sales outcome. And they're going to allocate their time accordingly because it's a test. And when you test in manufacturing, there's an understanding that you're going to change process and you're trying to find the right change. So when you test in sales and marketing to determine whether you should change, there's an expectation that it's just a fad and everyone buckles up. It'll pass soon. So we have to address that fundamental difference. In manufacturing, we experiment. We're expecting that we're going to make a change and improve. We're going to get it right. In sales and marketing, we just go through these convulsions periodically where we say we want to change something. So often there's resistance or passive aggressive resistance because people just figure, hold on, this too will pass. Now, every system, technology, content piece, personnel change, everything has to be built not around some adaptation of how you've traditionally done things, but rather around how buyers buy. When you look at this, you understand there's logical and there's emotional buying. Things have changed. The buying process, the buying teams, the expectations, the sense of overwhelm, the unimaginable workload that people are trying to juggle. It's also very, very, very different. So ORE, overall revenue effectiveness, is a system to engineer an approach that addresses markets as they exist for buyers. At a high level, buyers have changed the game. As sales and marketing, we need to step up. We need each other. Marketing does no good if you don't have good salespeople, and salespeople have to figure out how to work with buyers going 70% of the way through their buying journey before they want to talk to sales. Marketing helps with that. We have to understand that the entire revenue growth function is an integrated system. And small deviances in one place can have a huge impact in the net quality output in terms of predictable, profitable revenue. And we have to take a systematic approach. That means we're going to have to track KPIs. We're going to have to work with continuous improvement. We're going to have to measure, hold people accountable, and create systems that will drive predictable results. All right, so let me pull this slide up. You've got a code that you can scan there that will give you free access to a multi-page diagnostic. That's just a bunch of questions that let you very quickly, yes, no, figure out where you currently stand in terms of a lot of the different aspects of this integrated system across marketing and sales and everything else. So hopefully that's been helpful. I do these LinkedIn lives periodically. I also broadcast them to YouTube Live and Twitter Live. If you're intrigued by the overall revenue effectiveness system, by all means, you've got my email and my phone number there. Love to chat with you. Feel free to reach out and let's have a conversation. If you want, download the diagnostic, run it, share it with some people on your team. Maybe you give it to them. Don't tell them what your ranking is or what your ratings are. Just collect feedback from somebody on the board, a couple of people in executive management, a couple of people in marketing, a couple of people in sales, and compare them. And you may find a really interesting divergence in the way people in your company look at it. Thanks for your time today. Thanks for joining me. Hope you found this worthwhile and look forward to seeing you on a future live event. I'm Ed Marsh. Thanks for joining me.